is my request that you approve the resolution authorizing me to execute the collective bargaining agreement for the fire union. I'm not going to go through all the details of it. It's 60 pages long, and you're already familiar with a lot of the key elements, and I provided a highlights summary in the packet. In addition, I can say that the chief and other members of our management team during the course of negotiations had a separate team that made some more technical and less controversial language revisions, and so he was involved in that. And so we're happy to talk the details of any of those if you wish, but I think that they're pretty well laid out in the materials. What I'd like to do instead is talk about just two things that aren't discussed in detail in the council packet material that you have received, and that is why this agreement took 3.5 years to finalize and what the principal issues were. First of all, I want to really emphasize that not only you as mayor and council, but our staff as well, greatly appreciate the work, the sacrifice, the commitment that our firefighters have. And there is never, throughout this 3.5 years, any reduction or diminution or minimization, whatever, of our high regard for the work that the fire office firefighters do. So why did it take 3.5 years? I mean, during the negotiation process, council was frequently asked this question, so it certainly should be answered. Certainly the hardworking men and women of the Decatur Fire Department need to know what happened. So why it took so long is basically 3 reasons. The first is that at almost every turn, when it was time for getting together again, it was the city that had to pull the union back into negotiations. Sometimes 3 months would go by, 4 months, 5 months, and in one case an entire year when we would on a monthly basis through our labor council attorney saying, it's time to get back together again, let's have a meeting. And it was always the city trying to, pulling the union back to the table. To their credit, they came, but that happened countless times, and sometimes for, like I said, for much of a year. But that wasn't the only reason for the delay. Midway through the negotiations, the leadership of the union changed, which is their right to do that. So the bargaining committee decided that they were also entitled to throw out the previous tentative agreements and to start an entire new process over again from square one. Now, while doing that is not illegal, it is unethical, and it's an unfair labor practice. And it took a lot of time because we lost time and had to regain all of that ground, and that took months. The third reason that it took so long is that at a different point in the negotiating process, some of the union leaders began individually lobbying council members going around the collective bargaining process as it was set forth in statute, and I think represented to the union membership that they could somehow overturn the normal process in this way, and so that also added to the process in terms of time. Now, that's not illegal either, but it's also an unfair labor practice. So the city filed unfair labor practice charges with the State Labor Relations Board. Later on, in the interest of reaching a settlement with the union, it was later withdrawn. But Mayor and Council, 90% of the delays that resulted in this 3.5-year timeline were caused by these 3 things, or some combination of them. The good men and women of the fire department are entitled to know an answer about why that took so long, and I genuinely and sincerely hope that they can obtain answers from their leadership as to why that happened. To the issues. From the beginning of union negotiations with the fire union, there were really only 2 issues that motivated the city. I mean, certainly the union brought their issues to the table, as is proper. Now, any union negotiation involves salary. That's just a given. But apart from that, there were 2 issues. The first one had to do with an attempt by the city to pursue some modest pension reform, and the second had to do with our desire to have a unified, more unified than we had before, health insurance benefits structure. In April, Councilman McDaniel and I were in a House Local Government Committee meeting, packed, standing room only, over at Capitol, where the Illinois Municipal League was making a presentation on the importance of the state restoring the local government's percentage on LGDF. And neither Mr. McDaniel or I gave testimony at that time, but The executive director of the IML, Brad Cole, had arranged for 15 mayors to give testimony representing the broad geographic and cultural and economic diversity of our state. And almost every single one of them said, don't take this money away from us, besides the fact you keep giving us unfunded mandates. And the chief unfunded mandate that they, almost all 15 of them mentioned, was the increasing cost of public safety pensions. This is a problem throughout the state, and while we can't fix some of the stuff that the General Assembly controls, and they show no interest in making any serious changes, there are some things that local governments can do, and so we tried to institute some of those in a way that affected no existing member of the fire union, I was disappointed, to tell you the truth, that because we even suggested some of these things, that we were accused of being anti-firefighter, which is not true. We're very pro-firefighter. The city council has been repeatedly, through the years, very invested in new fire stations and equipment and technology and other ways to support the fire operation. But the Associated Firefighters of Illinois has this thing that they do. If you question the pension, then you're against pensions. You don't want police firefighters to have pensions, and you're against firefighters. None of those is true, but that's the polarization that we faced. The union has, over the course of 3.5 years, fiercely resisted these changes, even though no existing employees were displaced by some of the modest pension reform proposals that we offered. And even though the health plan that every other city employee has was better and had more options than the one that they wanted to retain. Eventually, the city council instructed me to settle for, because it had taken 3 years, and understanding that we need to find some modified or incremental way of getting there, and so we did exactly that. We didn't achieve all of our objectives. We achieved some. Even the reduction of one of the 40-hour fire inspectors saves the city close to $1.8 million just in pension costs over the next 25 years. So we had some progress. The eventual agreement, which is reflected in the summary that you have in your packet, does not illustrate all of this drama. In order to hang on to their 17-year-old health plan, the union settled for one with fewer benefits and fewer options. In order to resist even some of the modest pension reforms, the union ended up settling for a lesser salary adjustment than had previously been on the table. But we closed the contract, and it is closed now for another 1.5 years because the contract that is before you now runs through the end of December of 2024, so another 1.5 years before we have to deal with this again. And I think that the council's decision to say, let's just bring this to an end and do what we can, and then deal with other steps during the next negotiating session, acknowledges the fact that the city just has to try to achieve its long-term sustainability objectives more incrementally, and so that's what we will do.
And we hope the next one goes a little quicker. That's all we can. Questions for the manager about the contract? Or comments? Mr. Culp?
No questions, because I think we'd be here all night. Just a statement that brief is great, unneeded. It was posted. Let's move on. Let's vote on it. We're only hearing one side of this. And speaking of drama, we just played into it by doing that. You don't speak for all of us. I appreciate it.
Dr. Horn?
Well, rather than blame entities for how long it took for negotiations to become finalized, I just wanted to thank everyone involved in the negotiations for your very long hours and your tireless efforts to achieve an agreement that was agreed to by both sides. I also want to thank the Decatur firefighters for the work that you do every day to protect the lives, the safety, and the property of our citizens. Decatur citizens are very fortunate to have such dedicated and courageous public servants. I have personally witnessed Decatur firefighters save people's lives under challenging circumstances, and I've witnessed firsthand very difficult challenges that firefighters have faced, and I can't imagine the depth of 30 years of those types of experiences and how that impacts people. And finally,